Hossein Abdi sat in the back of his private jet, staring out at the sprawling city of Nairobi below. The lights shimmered like stars scattered across the earth, but they brought him no comfort. For years, Hossein had built his empire from scratch, transforming a modest logistics company into a billion-dollar venture. His name was synonymous with success, his face plastered across magazines as one of Kenya's most eligible bachelors. Yet, despite his wealth and status, loneliness clung to him like a shadow. Every relationship he'd ever had ended the same way, with betrayal. Whether it was women fawning over his money or business associates looking to exploit his generosity, he had grown weary of being seen only for his fortune. The idea of love, true, unconditional love, had become a distant fantasy. And so, in a bold move, Hossein decided to leave behind the life he'd built. He would abandon the luxury and pretense, choosing to live as a simple man in one of Kenya's most remote regions, Wajir. "Sir, we'll be landing shortly," his pilot informed him, breaking his thoughts. Hossein nodded absently, his mind already drifting to the life that awaited him. For the next several months, he would pose as a struggling camel trader, a role far removed from his true identity. He had no experience with the desert or its unforgiving conditions, but that was part of the challenge. He needed to strip himself of the privileges he'd taken for granted and see the world through a different lens. When the jet touched down at a modest airstrip on the outskirts of Garissa, Hossein stepped out, dressed in a simple white kanzu and a pair of worn sandals. His usual entourage of assistants and bodyguards was absent. All he carried was a weathered leather bag containing a few clothes and a fake ID with the name Abdurrahman Ali. He had memorized every detail of his fabricated backstory, a struggling camel trader who had lost his herd to the drought and was now seeking a fresh start in Wajir. From Garissa, Hossein hired a battered Land Rover to take him deeper into the arid north. The landscape changed as they traveled, the bustling urban scenes giving way to endless stretches of sand and thorny acacia trees. The heat was oppressive, and Hossein soon realized just how unprepared he was for the harshness of the desert. Sweat drenched his back, and he regretted not bringing a bottle of water for the journey. As the vehicle bounced along the dusty road, the driver, a wiry man named Yusuf, stole glances at Hossein. "You don't look like someone who belongs out here," Yusuf remarked with a raised brow. Hossein forced a laugh, trying to appear nonchalant. "Looks can be deceiving. I'm just trying to make a living, like everyone else." Yusuf grunted in response, clearly unconvinced but too preoccupied to press further. Hossein felt a flicker of unease. He had spent weeks preparing for this new life, yet he realized how glaringly different he must seem to those who truly belonged to these lands. By the time they reached Wajir, dusk was falling, and the sky blazed with hues of orange and red. The village was a modest cluster of mud brick houses and makeshift tents, surrounded by a desolate expanse of desert. Children played barefoot in the sand, while women balanced heavy jerry cans of water on their heads. Camels roamed lazily, their shadows stretching long in the fading light. Hossein paid Yusuf and stepped into the village, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. This was it, the beginning of his new life. He spotted an elderly man seated under a tree, mending a broken sandal with care. Hossein approached him, introducing himself as Abdurrahman. The man squinted up at him, his face weathered but kind. "You're new here," he said, his voice gravelly. "Yes," Hossein replied. "I'm looking for work. Anything to help me get by." The man gestured to the camels grazing nearby. "Do you know how to handle camels?" Hossein hesitated, then shook his head. "Not much, but I'm willing to learn." The old man chuckled. "At least you're honest. I'm Ibrahim. Stay out of trouble, and you might just find a place here." Hossein thanked him and walked further into the village, taking in the sights and sounds. He passed a small market where women sold dried fish and handmade crafts. It was a far cry from the sleek malls and high-end restaurants he was used to, but there was something raw and authentic about it. As he continued exploring, he noticed a young woman distributing cups of water to a group of children. Her movements were swift and purposeful, and her voice carried a tone of authority that commanded respect. She was dressed simply, in a brightly colored shuka, but there was an undeniable elegance about her. Hossein watched from a distance, captivated. He didn't know her name, but something about her presence stirred a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: hope. For the first time, he felt like he had made the right decision. This village, with its hardships and simplicity, might just be the place where he could find what he was looking for. Little did he know, his journey was only beginning, and the path ahead would test him in ways he could never have imagined. Chapter 2, The Village of Weja. The first night in Weja was far from what Hossein had envisioned. Used to soft mattresses, air conditioning, and gourmet meals, he now found himself lying on a thin straw mat in a modest hut lent to him by Ibrahim, the elder he had met earlier. The walls of the hut were made of mud and sticks, and the air inside was stifling. Flies buzzed incessantly, and the faint bleating of camels echoed through the stillness of the night. Hossein stared up at the uneven ceiling, his thoughts racing. His decision to leave behind his life of luxury had seemed noble at the time, but now, surrounded by the harsh reality of the desert, doubt began to creep in. Could he really adapt to this way of life? Was he truly ready to strip away the comforts he had always known? Sleep came in restless fits, and by dawn, Hossein was awakened by the crowing of a rooster. The village was already stirring to life. Women were fetching water from the single borehole, while men prepared their herds for the day's grazing. The aroma of freshly brewed chai wafted through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the desert. As Hossein stepped outside, Ibrahim greeted him with a toothless grin. "Good morning, young man. Did the night treat you well?" Hossein forced a smile. "It was different. I get used to it." Ibrahim chuckled, his laughter filled with the wisdom of a man who had seen many seasons. "The desert is not kind to newcomers, but it teaches resilience. You'll learn." Hossein nodded, appreciating the elder's kindness. He decided to spend the day observing the village's rhythms, hoping to blend in and earn the trust of its people. He wandered through the market, where women sold hand-woven baskets, dried beans, and small piles of sorghum. The merchants greeted him cautiously, their eyes scanning him with mild suspicion. As he moved through the market, Hossein once again saw the young woman who had caught his attention the day before. She stood near a group of children, her voice firm yet compassionate as she instructed them to line up for their rations of water. Her confidence was magnetic, and her beauty, though understated, was undeniable. Curious, Hossein approached her. "You seem to be in charge here," he said, offering a tentative smile. The woman glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Someone has to be. The drought doesn't leave room for laziness." Her tone was sharp, but there was no malice in it, only a deep sense of responsibility. Hossein extended his hand. "I'm Abdurrahman. I'm new to the village." She hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Halima. If you're looking to help, there's plenty to do." "I'd like that," Hossein replied. Halima studied him for a moment, her piercing gaze making him feel as though she could see straight through his disguise. "Good. Meet me at the borehole after breakfast. We'll see what you're made of." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Hossein both intrigued and slightly intimidated. After a modest breakfast of flatbread and sweet tea, Hossein made his way to the borehole, where Halima was waiting. She handed him a jerrycan and pointed to a line of women and children. "We are rationing water today. Your job is to ensure everyone gets their fair share. No more, no less." Hossein nodded, eager to prove himself. The task seemed simple enough, but he quickly realized it was far more demanding than he had anticipated. The jerrycans were heavy, and the desert sun was merciless. Sweat poured down his face as he walked, his muscles aching with each lift. Halima watched him closely, her arms crossed. "You're not used to this kind of walk, are you?" Hassan paused, wiping his brow. "Not exactly. But I'm learning." She smirked. "At least you're honest. That's more than I can say for most." Despite her initial skepticism, Halima began to warm up to him as the day went on. She was impressed by his determination, even as his inexperience showed. When the water distribution was complete, she handed him a small cup of water. "You've earned this," she said with a rare smile. "Thank you," Hassan replied, his gratitude genuine. As they sat under the shade of an acacia tree, Halima shared stories of the village's struggles. The drought had persisted for months, leaving crops withered and livestock dying. The borehole was their only source of water, and even that was running dangerously low. Hassan listened intently, his respect for Halima growing with every word. She wasn't just surviving, she was leading, finding ways to keep her community afloat despite the odds stacked against them. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "You could leave, find a better life somewhere else." Halima shook her head. "This is my home. These are my people. If I don't fight for them, who will?" Her words struck a chord with Hassan. He had come to wager searching for authenticity, and here it was, in the unwavering resolve of a woman who refused to give up. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Hassan realized he was beginning to find what he had been searching for. But he also knew his journey was far from over. Halima rose to her feet, brushing the sand from her shuka. "You did well today, Abdurrahman. Let's see if you can keep it up." Hassan watched her walk away, a sense of determination settling in his chest. He didn't just want to keep up, he wanted to earn her trust, her respect, and maybe, just maybe, her heart. The morning began with the distant bleats of camels and the chatter of villagers preparing for a long journey. Hassan had learned the previous evening that Halima and a group of traders were heading to a neighboring town to barter goods for essential supplies. Seeing an opportunity to prove himself, he volunteered to join them. "You've never handled camels before," Halima said, raising an eyebrow as she inspected Hassan's makeshift gear. "Are you sure you're up for this?" "I'll manage," Hassan replied with a determined smile. Halima smirked. "We'll see." The caravan set off just after sunrise, the villagers guiding their camels laden with goods through the scorching desert. Hassan quickly discovered that managing a camel was far from easy. His assigned camel, a stubborn beast named Saba, seemed intent on testing his patience. Every time he tried to lead her, she either stopped abruptly or veered off course. "Pull gently, not too hard," Halima called out, clearly amused by his struggles. She walked beside her own camel with practiced ease, her movements fluid and confident. Hassan followed her advice, and after some trial and error, Saba finally obeyed. "You make this look easy," he said, catching up to her. Halima shrugged. "It's not about strength. It's about understanding them. Camels are like people, they need trust and patience." Their conversation continued as the caravan moved across the barren landscape. Halima shared stories of past journeys, while Hassan listened intently, occasionally chiming in with his own fabricated anecdotes. He admired her resilience and the way she carried herself with quiet authority. By midday, the group stopped to rest under the sparse shade of an acacia tree. Halima handed Hassan a gourd of water. "Sip, don't gulp. You'll regret it if you finish it all now." Hassan nodded, grateful for her guidance. As they sat together, the vastness of the desert stretched out before them, an endless expanse of sand and sky. For a moment, Hassan felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. That evening, the caravan reached its destination, a bustling trading post where villagers from surrounding areas gathered to barter goods. Halima negotiated skillfully, trading handmade baskets and dried meat for sacks of grain and jerry cans of water. Hossein watched in admiration, noting how the other traders respected her. As the group prepared to return to wager, Halima approached Hossein. "You did well today," she said, her tone softer than usual. "Maybe you're not as hopeless as I thought." Hossein chuckled. "High praise coming from you." Halima smiled, and for a brief moment, their eyes met, a flicker of unspoken understanding passing between them. The return journey to wager was uneventful, but Hossein's mind was far from at ease. His feelings for Halima were growing stronger with each passing day, yet so was the weight of his deception. How could he reconcile the man he was pretending to be with the man he truly was? Back in the village, Hossein threw himself into the daily routines, assisting with camel care, water distribution, and even learning how to repair tools. The villagers began to warm up to him, and Halima seemed to appreciate his efforts, though she remained guarded. One evening, as they walked side by side repairing a broken cart, Halima spoke. "You're different, Abdurrahman. You don't seem like someone who spent his whole life in the desert." Hossein's heart raced. "What makes you say that?" Halima shrugged, her eyes focused on the cartwheel. "You notice things others don't. You handle tools like someone who's had training. And sometimes, you look at this place like it's all new to you." Hossein forced a laugh. "Maybe I've just spent too much time wondering." Halima didn't press further, but her words lingered in Hossein's mind. He knew it was only a matter of time before his carefully constructed facade began to crack. That night, he sat alone under the stars, torn between his growing love for Halima and the fear of losing her if she discovered the truth. The morning began like any other, but tension hung in the air. A group of traders from a neighboring village arrived with news of a potential deal for a new water pump. Halima was immediately interested, knowing how desperately Wager needed a reliable water source. As the traders discussed prices, Hossein overheard a figure that made his stomach drop. The pump would cost more than the village could afford. Without thinking, he excused himself and called a trusted contact in Nairobi, arranging for the pump to be purchased anonymously and delivered to Wager. When the pump arrived a few days later, the villagers were ecstatic. Halima, however, was suspicious. She cornered Hossein after the installation. "How did this happen?" she demanded. "Who paid for it?" Hossein hesitated, knowing he couldn't lie any longer. "It was me," he admitted. Halima frowned. "What do you mean, you? How could you afford this?" Taking a deep breath, Hossein revealed the truth. "My name isn't Abdurrahman Ali. I'm Hossein Abdi, a businessman from Nairobi. I came here to escape my life, to find something real. And I found you." Halima stared at him, her expression a mix of shock and betrayal. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling. "All this time, you've been pretending to be someone you're not." "I never meant to hurt you," Hossein said, his voice pleading. "I only wanted to know you, to see if you could love me for who I am, not for my wealth." Halima shook her head, stepping back. "You don't understand. Trust is everything here. And you've broken mine." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Hossein alone with the weight of his choices. For days, the village buzzed with whispers about the truth of Hossein's identity. Some were grateful for his generosity, while others, like Halima, felt betrayed. Hossein tried to make amends, offering to stay and help the community further, but Halima kept her distance. Finally, as the sun set one evening, Hossein approached Halima one last time. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "But before I go, I need you to know that everything I did was because I care about you. You've taught me more about strength and kindness than I ever thought possible. I only hope you can forgive me someday." Halima's eyes softened, but she said nothing. As Hossein walked away, he felt a mix of sadness and hope. He had come to Wager searching for authenticity, and while he hadn't found what he expected, he had found something far greater, the courage to be himself. The next morning, Hassan left Wager, the desert fading behind him. Though his journey in the village had ended, he carried its lessons with him, knowing they would guide him for the rest of his life.